بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله الأزكياء وأصحابه الأتقياء أما بعد. As a part of our Ramadan preparation series, today we intend to cover the subject of the fiqh of fasting. Now, where this subject could be very detailed, and there is a lot that could be covered in it, the reality is that when it comes to the issue of fasting, many of the masail can be summarized, many of the issues can be summarized in a few basic principled issues. If you understand those issues, the rulings will begin to answer, you'll be able to answer the rulings yourself easily, inshallah. And today our goal will be to cover those basic usuli, principled, fundamental issues. But we start at the beginning as always. Fasting is one of the pillars of Islam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, as we know from the famous hadith, authentic narration, Bunya al-Islamu ala khams, that Islam is found and it's built on 5 foundations, 5 pillars. And from these 5 pillars, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam listed fasting. The word we use in the Arabic language for fasting is sawm. And the word sawm literally means al-imsak, which means to hold back, to withdraw, to disengage. Legally, the word sawm means to disengage from eating, drinking, and intimacy from the break of dawn until the setting of the sun with a valid intention. This is the definition of fasting. I'll say that again. To withdraw or disengage from eating, drinking, and intimacy. So these are the things that we need to stay away from. Now we're going to cover the zaman, the period. From the break of dawn until the setting of the sun, and we need a valid intention. So the last thing was with a valid intention. If all of these components are present, now you have a fast, a legal fast. So, to run a scenario, if someone stays away from eating while in the month of Ramadan, being in the hours of fasting, but they're still drinking, that's not a fast. Similarly, someone stays away from eating and drinking and intimacy from Dhuhr Salah, which is at noon, until Maghrib Salah, which is sunset, then that won't be a legal fast either because you're far into the window. You were supposed to stop at the break of dawn, not sunrise. If someone eats until sunrise, their fast won't count either. They need to pull all the way back to the break of dawn, which is what we call Tulu'ul Fajr al-Sadiq. There's Fajr al-Kadhib and Fajr al-Sadiq. The true dawn, from there they stop eating and drinking and intimacy all the way until sunset. Lastly, you need to have a valid intention. So if a person doesn't have an intention at all, they decide to stay hungry, they're not eating and drinking because that's what their diet says, and they have no intention at all the way from the break of dawn until the setting of the sun, again, there is a key component of fasting that is missing, therefore their fast will be incomplete. Now, there are different types of fasts in Sharia. Okay? Scholars have divided them into saying, similar to last week, either it's mandatory or it's voluntary. Either it's mandatory or it's voluntary. Some scholars have also listed on and they said there are some types of fasts that are beyond mandatory and voluntary. There are some fasts that are actually makruh. And then there are other fasts that we also learn from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that are actually haram. So an example of a haram fast is fasting on Eid. Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr. Either Eid, fasting on that day is haram. An example of a makruh fast is to fast, for example, only on Friday, thinking that there's virtue fasting only on Friday. This is an example fuqaha have given. Similarly, another example of a disliked fast is what some scholars refer to as somul wisal, where a person just continuously keeps fasting without doing any iftar or any suhoor. 5 days have passed by, they haven't eaten anything, they haven't drinking anything. Another example of a disliked fast could be that a person only fasts on the 10th of Muharram without adding another day, Tasu'ah, or the 11th day, while other scholars have argued that isn't makruh, rather it's jaiz and sunnah. Anyway, there's discussion for many of these. There are multiple opinions, but I'm just trying to give you an example. Now, a nafil fast or a jaiz sunnah fast would be, for example, it's encouraged yet not mandatory, is for example how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would fast on Mondays and Thursdays. This is an example of something that's voluntary, good, preferable, but yet it's not mandatory. Now, example of mandatory, the simple example would be fasting in the month of Ramadan. Or for example, nadhr. Nadhr is where a person says, if I pass my exam, I will fast 3 days. Now he passed the exam, those 3 days, fasting of those 3 days now is necessary. So this is a brief breakdown of the different fasts in Ramadan. Now keep in mind, if someone wishes to study the same issue that I presented to you right now in more detail, you can find more detail. For example, there's an idea of there's a sawm that's mu'ayyan versus ghayr mu'ayyan. There is a fast that's mandatory upon a person, and it's specific. It needs to be done in this window, and it cannot be done outside that. For example, when it comes to the fasting of Ramadan, can you do it outside of Ramadan? If you do it outside of Ramadan, it'll be qada, it'll be a makeup. It won't be ada. It won't be on time. Now there are other fasts that are mandatory, but they're ghayr mu'ayyan. Ghayr mu'ayyan means that they're mandatory, but they aren't limited to a particular day. They aren't limited to a particular time. An example of this is someone says, if I pass my exam, I'll fast 3 days. Now they don't say which 3 days. So now we have 3 fasts that are mandatory upon this person, but these are mu'ayyan or ghayr mu'ayyan. Ghayr mu'ayyan, which means they're not specified, because the person didn't stipulate at some point in their life they will need to fast. Now the reason why we make this distinction is because there is a discussion on when the person doing the fast must make an intention for the fast. At what point do you need to intend for the fast? Before you start the fast, the night before, or at some point during the fast? And I'll cover this issue briefly when we get there in our class today, inshaAllah al-Aziz. When was fasting obligated? Majority of the scholars, they say that fasting was recommended well before Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ and the companions had different fasts they engaged in. But however, fasting became obligated in the month of Sha'ban in the 2nd year after Hijrah. Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahmatullahi alayhi states that Nabi ﷺ fasted for 9 Ramadans in his life. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani says, Nabi ﷺ fasted for how many? 9 Ramadans in his life he fasted as fard, because it became fard in the 2nd year after Hijrah. Who must fast? Who is fasting obligated upon? The first condition for fasting to be obligated on a person is that that person must have Islam. A ghayr Muslim, a non-Muslim, is not mandated to fast. So for example, if you were in a Muslim country and there were non-Muslims working there, you could not obligate or force that non-Muslim person to fast in the month of Ramadan, because Sawm is not fard upon that person. The second thing, that person must be mature. They have reached the age of bulugh, the age of maturity. Now what is the age of maturity and bulugh? Either that person has reached it naturally there are 3 ways that a person can reach an age of maturity or bulugh. Number 1, for a male, seeing a wet dream. For a female, experiencing menstruation. Number 2, you see the growth of hair under your arms or under your navel. And number 3, you reach a particular age. Now what's that age? Some fuqaha said 14 years of age, some said 16 years of age, some said 18 years of age. So there is a difference of opinion on that exact age, when it is. That once you reach this age now, you've reached Sunnul Bulugh, you've reached the age of maturity. Now the ahkam and the rulings of Islamic law are directed towards this person because they are mature. And the third thing, you must be sane. A person must have sanity. If a person has aql, then now fasting will become necessary on this person. Now note here, there is no distinction between genders. If you're a male or female, it doesn't matter. If these 3 things are found, now fasting is necessary upon you. Now, once we know who fasting is necessary upon, it's important to know that if a person doesn't meet these requirements, it doesn't mean they can't fast. They can fast. And in some scenarios, they should fast. So, for example, there's a child who hasn't reached the age of maturity or puberty. Does that mean they shouldn't fast? Not at all. They should fast at a young age. As young as they are, as soon as they become capable of getting through a full fast, we as parents should encourage them, we as adults in the community should encourage them that get fasting, get started right away. I think of the ideal age to be the age that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded us to teach our children to start praying salah. Muru awladakum bis salah wa hum abna'u sab'a sinin. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, instruct your children to pray salah once they reach the age of 7. So therefore we see now there's a tahammul, there's an ability within a child at the age of 7 to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while being conscious of what they're doing, while being aware of what they're doing. And there is a physical ability within them to do it. I know some parents are afraid and they feel that if I push my children from a young age to worship, it can be overwhelming and burdensome for them. And every parent knows their situation of their child. Some children are a little bit more sensitive and they struggle, while others are a little bit more tough and they can endure and keep going forward. You as a parent need to know how far your child is. But the second thing I want to mention along with that is never underestimate the ability in your children. You'll be amazed. Children can do great stuff from a young age. Many of you know this, my children, they participate in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And when I see kids fighting at tournaments who are like 5 years old, 6 years old, you'll be amazed. Some of these kids that are fighting are just so brutal and they're so rough. And I think to myself that in our community, people look at 5, 6-year-old kids and they're thinking that these kids are not capable of doing much, go easy on them, while other parents have pushed their children so far that mashallah, they're competing on a national level and they're so brave and so strong, so physically able. So the same thing goes with Sawm, Salah as well. That if you coach your kids to do it, you'll be amazed that they can do it. I know many parents, and some of you may think this is dhulm, and I understand if you do, because, every person has their own perspective. I've seen children fasting from the age of 4, like a whole fast. And this isn't like an isolated case. This is actually very common. And every 3rd, 4th home you'll find this, that you ask someone, what's the first age that your child fasted on? Adil, when was yours? 5? Many people, they hear 5 and what will they say? Oh God, you're crazy. You're forcing your child. It's all about the tarbiyah, the way you present it to them. The way you coach them and excite them about the fast. And if you help them get there slowly, that when they're ready to fast at 4. I'm sure parents even get their kids fasting at 3, depending on what time of the year it is. Maybe it's in winter and the hours are short. At the end of the day, I'll say this. Rather than passing judgment on parents, let them make the decision. Because at the end of the day, they are the parents. And for you to think for a moment that there is a parent who doesn't love their child is quite judgmental. So how about we hold our reservations back, hold our judgments back, and let those parents decide what's best for them. I'm not saying that you should tell your children to fast at 4, 3, 2, or 1. What I'm saying is, as a parent, don't demotivate your child from fasting from a young age. Regardless of whether we do 3, 4, or 5, when it comes to 7, what I definitely recommend at this point is to start encouraging your children more aggressively, more firmly, to start fasting when it comes to the month of Ramadan. So that way, now when they reach Sann al-Bulugh, whether they reach the age of maturity at the age of 10, whether they reach it at the age of 14, now they're able to do it. They've built routine, just like Salah. They're not waking up one morning and now they're starting, because that's when they're really going to struggle. There's routine and there's practice. Now the Prophet ﷺ also informs us that there are some people who meet this criteria, yet the Sharia has given them a concession if they choose not to fast. Someone may be Muslim, a person may be mature, a person may have sanity, but there are certain scenarios in which Rasulullah ﷺ is telling us that if you wish, these are situations that you can skip fasting. However, since it was obligated upon you in the first place, if you choose not to fast, you will need to do qada. Do you guys understand? Now, as opposed to someone who didn't meet all 3 of these conditions or any one of them, if they choose not to fast, there's no qada because there was no ahliyah in the first place. There was no taklif. That person wasn't mandated or obligated in any way. The ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was never directed at that person from the get-go because that person didn't have sanity. Samjid, you guys understand the difference here? In the scenario that we're speaking of now, that person, the ruling was directed towards them, but however the Sharia gave them a concession because a specific situation they're in. What are some of these situations? Safar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَىٰ سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Safar is one which means to travel. If someone is traveling, they are given an exclusion to not fast that day. Now, however, there are some things that must be kept in mind. I think one common mistake people make when they talk about this issue is that they fail to realize that you can only skip the fast altogether if you are currently traveling at the time of suhoor. This is a common mistake people make. They think that because I'm going to be traveling at 12 o'clock, I don't have to fast. That's not true. If you are muqim, if you are a resident, at the time the fast starts, let's say for example today, Fajr time starts at 6 a.m. and my travel starts at 12 p.m. I cannot stop fasting because at 6 a.m. thinking that I'm going to travel at 12. The only time I can skip fasting on that day is if I leave my city limits before 6 a.m. I have to be outside of my city limits before 6 a.m. Once I've crossed my city limits at 6 a.m., now I can make niyyah of not fasting and I can skip that fast naturally. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. As I mentioned, you will however need to make those days up later on. The second scenario is that someone starts their fast at 6 a.m. because they were resident at that time, and the journey will start at, what time did we say? 12 p.m. Okay? Now at 12 p.m., once they cross their city limits, once they cross the city limit, now they have an option of breaking their fast. From that point onwards, they can break their fast. This is common, for example, when people go for Umrah in Ramadan. Maybe their flight takes off, at some point in the day, at Asr time sometimes, or it may leave at Dhuhr time. So they can't skip the fast right from the beginning of the day. They need to keep the fast. But when they become a musafir, at that point, they have a choice to break their fast. Keep in mind, they have a choice to break their fast. If they wish to continue the fast and finish it off, then وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jal says, and if you choose to fast, then that's better for you. That's better for you. If you choose to continue fasting and finish your fast off, even while you're a traveler, that's a praiseworthy thing. Similarly, another person that's excused of fasting is a woman who is in hayd or experiences nifas. A woman who has hayd, or hayd meaning menstruation, nifas post-birth or post-natal bleeding. Now, this person, their fast is a little different. There's no أَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ in this scenario. There's no option. You know how in fasting and traveling I said they have an option? When it comes to these two individuals, they actually don't have an option. It's not permissible to fast while in hayd or in nifas. This individual, this lady, will need to miss that fast, and then they will do qada of it outside of the month of Ramadan. Ideally, the qada should be done before the next Ramadan, but technically speaking, at any point before they die, they are responsible of doing qada of the fast that were missed that Ramadan due to hayd or nifas. Number 3, a person is physically unable to fast. They're incapable of fasting. What that means is someone's chronically ill. What did I say someone is? Chronically ill. Like they have diabetes, for example. And this is probably going to be them until the end of their life. So in this situation, again, this person is excused from fasting. Similarly, a sort of illness, but this is a little different. Someone is able of fasting, but fasting may delay their recovery or increase their ailment. Someone is capable of fasting. But if they continue to fast, the doctor is saying that if you don't take this medicine as frequently as I'm telling you to take it, your recovery will prolong. Now Sharia has given this person concession that you could skip fasting. Or for example, if you continue to fast, your sickness is going to increase. We need you to start eating more so you can get more energy, so that way you can recover more quickly. In this scenario, again, this person has the permission to forego their fast. Similarly, the ulama say that a lady who was pregnant or she is nursing her child is also permitted to skip her fast. Because by fasting, she may violate the haqq of the child that's in her, or the child she is nursing. If she is lacking in nutrients, the child will also lack in those nutrients too. There are some mothers who fast while they're pregnant and fast while they're nursing. Again, every mother knows their situation. And I'm really big on this, guys. Don't give people the guilt trip if they choose to do something that you don't agree with. Let them choose for themselves. Every mother gets to choose what she wishes to do for her child and what she wishes to do with her body. Just like a sick person. A sick person may choose to fast. There's no need for us to guilt anyone. If a person wants to fast and that's what they wish to do, that's their choice. Someone is traveling, they choose to fast, that's their choice as well. Now, the list can continue on, but that's where we're going to stop for now. I mentioned earlier that if a person wishes to fast, it is necessary for them to have an intention. You must have an intention. So passively staying hungry, and then after Maghrib time comes in, you say that I was fasting, that won't count as a fast. You have to, ibadah must be done actively. It can't be done passively. You can't just do it because it's happening. You have to intend to do it. That's what ibadah is. That's why you'll find in all ibadat, there is a need for niyyah. If you recall when we talked about zakat, one of the things I said to you, in order for your zakat to count, what must you have? A niyyah. Same thing with your salah, you need a niyyah. The ahnaf, the only sort of differentiation we make is ibadah maqsuda and ghayr maqsuda. The Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi says, if the ibadah is ghayr maqsuda, then you don't need an intention. And if it's maqsuda, then you must have an intention. What this means is, if the ibadah is not a worship in and of itself, but rather it's a stepstone for another ibadah to come into existence, then you don't need intention for that stepstone ibadah. So an example of this would be, wudu in itself is not an ibadah. You can't just sit there and keep doing wudu for 5 hours. There's no reward in that. Wudu is only rewarded because it facilitates salah. So therefore, wudu is ibadah ghayr maqsuda. What do we call wudu? Ibadah ghayr maqsuda. Therefore, Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi says that if a person does wudu without niyyah, the wudu will count. A scenario would be, a person is going to the masjid, on the way there's a river, they jump in the river, they swim across, they come out the other side. Are all the required limbs of the body wet? Sure, because they were in the pool. Let's say, for example, they fully immersed in. Their entire body is wet, but they didn't have an intention. According to Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, the wudu will be done. Because wudu is ibadah ghayr maqsuda. Salah is maqsuda. Salah is the intended worship. Wudu only became an act of worship because it leads to salah. If you just sit and do wudu on its own, there's no reward in and of itself. So when you come to sawm, fasting, it's ibadah maqsuda. It's a worship that is intended in and of itself. Therefore, we need an intention. Now, when do you need to make the intention by? How early do you have to make it, and how far can you delay it? There's a lot of ikhtilaf here, by the way. Okay? I'm going to try to summarize it with my recommendation as well. When it comes to fard ibadat, it's always best to be in a place of ihtiyat, where you are secure, you're not causing any doubt at all. You're in a place of security where you don't have any shak. So the best thing is, to accommodate all positions, try to make an intention the night before. Now with Ramadan, usually it's not a big deal. The only time you actually need to make an intention in Ramadan is the first day of Ramadan. The first fast of Ramadan, you need to make an intention because you're changing from not fasting to going into a state of fasting. And thereafter, mentally, you've already noted that for the next 30 days, 29 days, I'm going to be fasting. Do you guys understand this? So the actual active niyyah you need to make is on the first of Ramadan. The rest of them, your mind already knows that now I'm in Ramadan, the next 30 days, I'm going to be fasting. Now when it comes to nafil ibadat, how far can you push it? How far can you push the intention? One group of scholars, and this is a large group of scholars, even many from the Hanafi school of thought, they hold the position that you can delay it all the way to nisfun nahar. You can delay it all the way until, what did I say? Nisfun nahar. What does nisfun nahar mean? Anyone know? Not noon. You have to be careful. Half day, middle of the day. How do we calculate middle of the day? What the fuqaha they do is, they calculate the hours between sunrise and sunset and divide it by 2. So let's say, for example, sunrise was at 6 a.m., sunset was at 6 p.m. We're going to divide it by 2, which will give us how many hours? 6. So nisfun nahar would be at 12 p.m. at noon. There you go. The example worked out in your favor. Yes. But don't say noon as if it's a qaida. That's not the qaida. That's not the ruling. How do we calculate nisfun nahar, guys? We take Tulu' al-Shams, we take the rising of the sun, and go until Ghurub al-Shams, the setting of the sun, and we divide it by 2, because those are the day hours, and then from there we will have the number, this is Nisf al-Nahar. So now, for example, Nafal. So what this would look like is, a person didn't have anything for breakfast, they're getting closer to noon at this point, and that's the example, that's Nisf al-Nahar in our example, or 1 o'clock if that was the other example. They're getting closer to Nisf al-Nahar, midday, and they notice that, man, I don't think I'm going to get a chance to eat in the next 6 hours anyway. Inni sa'im. I am now fasting. This is jaiz. This is based on the riwayah that the Prophet ﷺ would come home after Fajr Salah sometimes, and he would ask his wives, is there anything for food? They would say no. He would say, فَإِنِّي صَائِمٌ, then I am fasting today. And sometimes he would ask them, is there anything for food? They would say yes. He would say, okay, I'm not fasting today. So Nabi ﷺ would make that intention of fasting or not fasting while being a few hours into the fasting window. Therefore, the fuqaha, they say this sort of concession is given to a person that is involved in a nafal fast. Some fuqaha have gone so far, they say, you aren't limited by nisfun nahar, you can make it intention even moments before iftar. As long as you didn't eat, drink, or engage in intimacy throughout the day. So let's say, for example, we said iftar was at 6 p.m. This person's like at 5:30, man, I haven't eaten all day, didn't drink all day, wasn't intimate today, let me just make intention of fasting. So some fuqaha also do accommodate for that. They are few, but there are jurists who do hold this position as well. I also mentioned that in order for a fast to be complete, we need to go from the break of dawn until the sunset, setting of the sun. Now, the setting of the sun is a very agreed upon issue. Like, there's no difference of opinion on when the sun sets. You don't need to check your Adhan app. You can ask Google. That's what I usually do. If I need to figure out what time sunset is, I just hit the Google voice and I say, what time is sunset today in Dallas, Texas? And it'll tell me 8:03 p.m. It's unanimous, it's agreed upon, it's a very simple thing to calculate. However, when it comes to the break of dawn, things get a little tricky. When it comes to the break of dawn, things get a little tricky. Now, you'll find scholars who hold different positions. Let me try to summarize the issue for you. All Muslim scholars agree that Fajr time starts and that marks the end of suhoor. We all agree on that. There's no second opinion. Okay? Are you guys with me? We all also agree that Fajr time starts at the appearance of something we call Subh Sadiq, which is a light that spreads in the horizon and it remains all the way until the sun rises. It's called the true dawn. What do we call it, guys? In opposition of the false dawn, or Subh al-Kadhib, which is a light that spreads vertically and then it disappears. Okay? So we all agree on that. However, when does Subh Sadiq actually occur? When does that light spread? You know that light that I was talking about, that horizontal light? When does it come into existence? Many scholars in America have performed multiple observations to calculate the exact time when Subh Sadiq occurs. Some scholars, they say, we've noticed from our observations that this Subh Sadiq occurs while the sun is, look carefully if you can look at my hand, I'm drawing one hand that kind of is going across the horizon. They're saying while the sun is 15 degrees beneath the horizon. So the sun is on its way up, and when it hits 15 degrees beneath the horizon, we've noticed that's the point where Subh Sadiq occurs. Are you guys following this? That is the most common position followed in the United States of America. This was an observation done by a group of specialists, and ISNA has accepted their observation. And if you look at ISNA calendars, or if you look at most Muslim phone app, Adhan calculators, what they do is they follow this observation of ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, and therefore the standard for the most part in America is that people stop doing suhoor and they start praying Fajr Salah when the sun is 15 degrees beneath the horizon. Now, other ulama have had other observations. There are other ulama who live in America who've said that we've seen Subh Sadiq occurring while the sun is 18 degrees beneath the horizon. which is basically 15-20 minutes earlier. Which is how many minutes earlier? 15, could even be 25 minutes earlier, depending on what season we're at. 25 minutes earlier. Some have said 17.5. You look at the calendar, you look at the Adhan app, if you look at it, I believe in Makkah Mukarramah, they pray Fajr Salah at 18.5 degrees. How many degrees? So if you go to your Adhan app, and you kind of just go through the different calculation methods they have, you'll see for Fajr Salah, they'll say one time, another person will say another time, another time, another time. So these are all based on observations. And each observation then becomes the ruling for that place. In particular, if there's a Muslim government, then they can surely enforce it. Personally, my personal practice, by the way, is that because it is Ramadan, and it's a very serious issue, I'm not telling anyone they have to do this. I'm just telling you my personal practice. I've always stopped my suhoor at 18 degrees, which is the earlier time. So that's how my clocks are set at my home. That's how the alarms are set at my home. I usually stop my suhoor at an earlier time, and I'll delay my fajr to the later time. So I'll wait 15-20 minutes, do some tilawah or whatever you wish to do. When fajr time comes according to the later time, this way I'm secure. I stopped my fast a little earlier, and I prayed my salah a little later. Therefore, according to all positions, we are accommodated for, we are taken care of. However, if someone wishes to stick with one particular position, there's nothing wrong with that at all. My advice is that you should stick with the time that is printed on the calendar of your local masjid. This is my practical advice. Whatever your local masjid is doing, stick with that, and inshallah there's khair in there. Now, when a person is fasting, there are some sunnahs, some recommendations. For example, Rasulullah ﷺ recommended the companions emphatically, repeatedly, again and again, to make sure they partook in suhoor. No matter how full or hungry you are, suhoor is from the sunnah of fasting. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told the companions, this is a distinction for the believers, that we perform, we engage, we partake in a meal of suhoor, a pre-dawn meal. Ideally, when we do our suhoor, we should delay it as much as possible, but not so much that it becomes, kind of merged into the time of Fajr. So if Fajr time is starting at 6 a.m., you should delay your suhoor until maybe 6:50, 6:55, 6:56, 6:57 as well. But don't leave it to 6:59, 59. Don't leave it until when? 6:59, 59 as well. Where there's 1 second left for Fajr Salah, and they're eating all the way until then. That's not a good thing as well. But you shouldn't have your suhoor at 4 a.m. so early. You should try to delay your suhoor. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned that there is barakah in this. Similarly, from the adab of fasting is that you should you should hasten and be quick in your iftar. Don't delay your iftar. Be quick. When the Maghrib Adhan is called, immediately drink some water. Immediately have a date. Don't delay it for another hour unless there's a necessity. If there's a necessity, for example, you don't have access to water, don't have access to dates, that's another masala. But otherwise, as soon as the Maghrib Adhan is called, you should grab your dates, grab your water, and chug away and chow away on your iftar. From the adab of fasting is to dedicate some time before iftar for dua. Dedicate some time before iftar for dua. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us this is the time where dua is accepted. This is the time when dua is accepted. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there are riwayat with the virtues of doing dua before iftar. So I was just going to repeat that again. Try to make a habit of doing that dua. Now, other than this, when it comes to fasting, there really isn't much prescribed. Do you guys understand? Fasting itself doesn't have much prescribed beyond this. So what are you supposed to do after suhoor all the way until iftar? There's nothing recommended. It's up to you. What we will say is stay away from sins. That's the bare minimum. So actually the bare minimum is stay away from eating, drinking, and intimacy. That's the bare minimum. Then secondly, stay away from sins. Thirdly, fulfill your fara'id. After that, whatever nawafil you wish to engage in. Do dua if you can. Do tilawat al-Quran if you can. If you want to read a book, that's okay. Build a relationship with the Quran by reading some tafsir, that's okay. These are all up to you. The two things I always recommend when it comes to Ramadan, number one, lock down your salah. Give it everything. Give your salah 100%. If you can just give your salah 100%, which means focus right from the moment the adhan is called. Focus all the way through, not skipping your nawafil. Don't skip your sunnah. Pray salah in its awwal al-waqt. For the men, come to the masjid and pray. Pray in jama'ah. If you can pray salah and lock it down, you will be very happy at the end of your Ramadan, inshallah. And the second thing that I always recommend for Ramadan is abundance of tilawatul Quran. Just do tilawah abundantly. Read a lot. My teachers and mashayikh would actually say, and I know this is a contentious point, and there are a lot of opinions on this. My teachers would say the month of Ramadan is not a month for tafsir. This is not a month to sit with the tafsir and read the translation or read the commentary on the Quran. They would say the month of Ramadan is purely for just tilawah. Just keep reading. Just keep reading. It's about reading in abundance. Now, even though this is what our teachers would say, if someone comes to me, you'll notice, and even in my lectures you've probably heard in the past, I tell people to read tafsir. I tell people to read translations. And the reason is because I feel like in our community outside Ramadan, no one touches the Quran at all. And it's a shame, but it's a reality. So in the month of Ramadan, if there's a way to build that relationship with the Quran, walhamdulillah, 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 we'll take it. But if someone is engaged with the Quran outside of Ramadan, when it comes to Ramadan, put the tafasir away. I remember once we were students in madrasa, and one of our classmates, he went to one of the senior teachers at the madrasa, and he said to him, Sheikh, I'm going to be at the madrasa during the month of Ramadan. Usually in Ramadan, the students would have holidays, vacations, so they would go home. Some of us would stay behind. So he said to the Sheikh that I'll be at the madrasa for 30 days, and I would like to benefit from you. So I wish to read some books, in our free time. So our Sheikh said to him, I don't have free time in Ramadan. And I think what you're doing is a very bad idea. You shouldn't be reading fiqh, hadith, and tafsir in Ramadan. You should just be doing tilawah. That's all you should be doing. That's what I'll be doing, and this is what I encourage you to do as well. People would come to Imam Malik rahimahullah, and they would say to him, teach us hadith in Ramadan. What would he say? Nope. The man loved hadith. He loved fiqh as well. But when the month of Ramadan would come, what would Imam Malik say? We're not doing fiqh, we're not doing hadith, we're doing one thing. And what is that one thing? Tilawatul Quran. Look at Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh. You can find in his biography that in the month of Ramadan, he would do 60 readings of the Quran. I didn't say 16. 60. He would do khatam of the Quran 60 times every Ramadan. This was Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala. Same is said regarding Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi. Similar reports are stated regarding Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, where these people would read and read and read. They would just keep engaging. Now it's possible, keep in mind, that even though they read so much, they were able to maintain a strong relationship with the Quran because these were people who focused on Quran and Hadith throughout the year. So when they're reading the Quran at a fast pace, their minds are probably processing the tafsir of every verse by the second. Like, oh yeah, this narration, oh that narration. They're kind of piecing it all together because they know the text and the content behind that text so well as well. Okay, now which things break a fast? Now when we talk about things that break a fast, it's important to know this. And I talked about this today in our class earlier today at the Qalam Seminary in the Quduri class. When we talk about breaking a fast, we have to view it from two perspectives. There are certain scenarios that if you break the fast, you will only have to do qada. Then there are other scenarios that if you break the fast, in addition to qada, you will need to do something called kafara. Let me explain. Qada is a makeup. Usually it's equivalent to what was obligated upon you. So for example, if I miss 2 rakat fajr, my qada will be how many rakat? 2, not 4. It'll be equal to the amount that was obligatory upon you. If I miss 3 rakat of maghrib, I will need to make up 3 rakat. If I miss 10 fast of Ramadan, or let's say I broke 10 fast in the month of Ramadan, in the scenario that qada is only mandatory upon me, how many fasts will I need to keep? 10. Samajh, you guys understand? If a kafara is necessary upon me, this is another type of breaking of the fast. Not only is there qada, but it's qada, which is the makeup, so the number of days that you miss plus the kafara. The kafara is 60 days consecutively. So your equation would be qada plus kafara equals to total number of days you need to fast. So if I broke 10 fasts, okay, if I broke how many? 10 fasts, and the breaking of the fast was done in a way that that kafara is also necessary upon me. Okay? So now how will I calculate how many days I need to fast? Number of days broken, which was 10, plus kafara, which we're going to say is 60 days of fasting. So in total, how many days will I need to fast? 70 days. Do you guys understand this? Let me explain it one more time. There are some scenarios that when you break the fast, you do not need to do kafara, you only need to do qada. Should I give you guys a simple example? Someone was a resident, 12 o'clock they decided to start traveling, they broke the fast. Now this person is not required to do any kafara. There's no penalty on this person. So if they broke the fast, they missed one fast, when they're doing qada, they have to do one. That's it. There's no kafara on this person, no penalty. The second scenario is that when a person breaks a fast, there's also a penalty. So an example of this, the examples of this are actually very few in Sharia, which are if a person eats, drinks, or engages in actual sexual intimacy. And here I mean the act of gender, of relationship between the husband and wife. The act itself, not anything else. Do you guys understand? All of those other things may result in a kafara, may result in a qada, not necessarily kafara. So in order for the kafara to occur, either eating, drinking, or the act of gender, I don't know what's the right way of saying this without being too explicit. Copulation. Okay, that works. The actual intimate act, and I have to emphasize this, it's the actual act, not anything before that, not anything after that. Anything short of that will not necessitate kafara. Keep this in mind, because there are a lot of people in the community that misunderstand this. I'm going to be explicit for a few moments, so if it's too much for you, I apologize. For example, if there's a young person in the community that engages in self-gratification or masturbation, the fast will break, but there will not be a kafara. Do you guys understand? Because this is not eating, drinking, or the actual act of sexual intimacy. Do you guys understand? Another example, and I apologize if these are a little too much. There's a couple that are married and they engage in foreplay, and during that foreplay, they ejaculate. There is no kafara here. Do you guys understand? Because they did not engage in the actual act itself. That's when the kafara becomes necessary. So the kafara only becomes mandatory in very few scenarios actually. A person eats or drinks. Now eating and drinking as well. If a person was sick and they eat and drink, there's no kafara. If a person was extremely hungry or if it's extremely dry outside, many scholars say no kafara. Eating and drinking will only necessitate the kafara if they did it out of arrogance. Ya Allah, you know what? I'm going to break the fast. And they drink some coke. Do something about it. Now there's going to be a kafara because of your arrogance. Samajro, you guys understand the situation here? So there are very few scenarios in which the kafara actually comes into existence. In most scenarios, you only have to do just a qada. Now since we're here, I might as well add one more issue. Should we cover the issues of qada and kafara right now? Let's just knock them all out. I was going to cover it at the end. Let's just do them all right now. Okay. Now if a person is doing qada, let's say for example, they couldn't fast because they had diabetes for the whole of Ramadan, or they decided to break fast. Maybe a person is sick and they say, I'm going to try to fast every day they start, every day they break. What did I say? Every day they start, but then what happens at 2 o'clock every day? They realize, I can't do it. And they try again the next day, and they break it again. If only qada is necessary upon you, then you must do the qada, you cannot give a fidya. You can't pay compensation for a missed fast. If you missed a fast, what do you need to do? What did I say? You have to make it up. The only time you can give a financial compensation, a fidya, is if you are incapable of fasting altogether, like a chronic illness. This is very important. People misunderstand this masala. This is why I intentionally phrased it the way I did. I chose the language I did intentionally. Because people, they think that, if you miss a fast, you can just pay and you're good to go. No, that's not how it works. If you miss a fast, what must you do? You must do the qada itself. You have to make the fast up. The only time where it's permissible for you to pay a compensation is if, what did I say? You're unable to fast for the rest of your life. Like it's chronic. At this point, this person, there's no tawakku or any hope that this person is going to recover. Masala number one. Number two, if you are going to give a fidya, The fuqaha, they say the fidya for fasting is what? One sadaqatul fitr per fast missed. So let's say, for example, your sadaqatul fitr is $10. Let's say, for example, you're giving sadaqatul fitr how much? $10. And you missed 10 fasts. So how many dollars are you going to give now in sadaqatul fitr? I'm sorry, how many dollars are you going to give in fidya for the fast missed? $100. So per fast missed, you will need to give a sadaqatul fitr. Okay, that's done. Now, in a scenario where you have to do kafara as well, in a scenario that you have to do kafara as well, it's important to know that when it comes to kafara, majority of the scholars, they say, you will need to fast 60 days consecutively without any break at all. It's kafaratul dhihar. Dhihar is an issue mentioned in the Quran in Surah Mujadala. So they take the ruling of missing a fast or breaking a fast is the same as kafaratul dhihar, which means that you will need to fast for 60 days consecutively without taking a break in the middle. Let's say, for example, you started fasting in Dhul Qa'dah. Which month? Dhul Qa'dah. Okay? Dhul Qa'dah, for those of you that are not aware, is the November of the Islamic calendar. It's the 11th month. Dhul Qa'dah is the 11th month. Dhul Hijjah is the 12th month. Now, you're supposed to fast for 60 days. You started on the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah. Come the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, what happens? It's Yawm al-Eid. How many days have you fasted so far? Roughly 40 days, let's just say 40 days you fasted so far. If you start at the beginning of Dhul Qa'dah, roughly 40 days you fasted so far. Is it jaiz to fast on Yawm al-Eid? It's not. So you can't fast on that day and you have to start all over again. You can't fast that day, and what do you need to do? Plan ahead, yes. You have to be a little aqalmand, you have to start all over again. This happened to one of our friends in madrasa, by the way. Assalamu alaikum. This is one of the things that happened to one of the students in our madrasa. This is one of the things that happened to one of the students at the madrasa, that he started fasting, he didn't calculate it right. Yawm al-Eid came. When Yawm al-Eid came, now what happens? شهرين متتابعين من قبل أن يتماسا. Surah Mujadala said that there are 60 days of consecutive fasting. So now this is a problematic issue. I remember one of the scholars telling him that you have one or two options. Either you do something haram and fast on Eid and continue your fast, or you don't do something haram and you start again. So this is a little tricky. Now, in the ayat of Dhihar, Allah Azza wa Jalla repeatedly says, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ. Therefore, the sequence is mandatory. So, what that means is either you fast 60 days consecutively, and actually it starts with tahrir raqabatin. It actually starts with freeing a slave. The ayat of Dhihar start with what, guys? Freeing a slave. And if you're not able of doing so, then fasting 60 days consecutively. And if you're not capable of doing so, then feeding 64 people. Feeding how many? 64 people. Now, this tartib here, this sequence, some scholars say it must be done in this sequence. While other scholars say, other fuqaha have said the sequence isn't necessary. Which means that if a person feels that I can't fast 60 days, this happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, as some of you may know, there was a companion who broke his fast. And then he came to Rasulullah and said, "O Messenger of Allah, I engaged with my wife while fasting." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Go free a slave." He said, "I'm broke, how am I going to free a slave?" The Prophet said, "Then fast 60 days. He said, "I couldn't fast one, you want me to fast 60? This is where his words. In the hadith, what did he say? I couldn't do one, you want me to fast 60? So Rasulullah ﷺ then said, "Go and feed 60 people." And he said, "Who's more poor than me? Who's more poor in Medina Munawwara than me?" Nabi ﷺ said, "Sit here, wait here." A little while later, someone came and gave some sadaqah. Nabi ﷺ gave this to him. He said, "Go give it to the fuqara." And that's when he actually made this statement. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, who's more poor than me?" So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Go spend it on yourself." So that was a concession given by Rasulullah ﷺ to him. Many of the fuqaha don't use this narration for tashri'i purposes, for legislative purposes, because obviously there are many questions regarding the implementation of such a scenario. Now, the last masala I want to mention is the idea of what do they call this? Combining in penalty. It's a masala, it's a ruling called combining in a penalty. There's a word for it, it slipped my mind. But anyway, so what this means is that, let's say for example, a person intentionally, without any valid reason, broke a fast by eating, drinking, or intimacy. And you guys understand what I mean by intimacy, okay? Multiple times in one Ramadan. How many kafaras do they have to give? Tadakhul, they call it. Tadakhul fil kafarat. How many times do they have to give the penalty? So if someone broke the penalty, someone broke 10 fasts like this in one Ramadan, does that mean they have to fast 600 fast? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Does that mean they have to fast 60, 600? Or can they just do one penalty and that'll suffice on behalf of all 10 fasts? So there is a large group of fuqaha, not a small group. What did I say? A large group of jurists who say tadakhul in kafarat is jaiz. Which means that if there are multiple penalties that a person owes, as long as they are from the same jins, as long as they are all from the same type, same origin. So for example, when it comes to 10 fasts of Ramadan, are they all the same? They're all fast, they're all fard, they're all from Ramadan. Samjha, you guys understand? Therefore, they say, if this person needs to do kafara, rather than doing 600 fasts, which would be 60 times 10, this person will just need to do one kafara. The only condition is this. Once you do a kafara, any fast that you break after that will require a new kafara. Does that make sense to you guys? Once you do a kafara, let's say for example, 5 years ago, la samahallah, but let's say 5 years ago, Anas here broke a fast intentionally. Are you guys with me? 5 years ago, Anas broke a fast intentionally. 2 years after that, he did the kafara. Okay? So the kafara for that is done. The year after he did the kafara, he broke another fast. Now this will require a new kafara. Do you guys understand? Because this fast was broken after the kafara, not before it. Now on the other hand, he broke a fast 5 years ago, then he broke another fast 4 years ago, another one 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago. So he broke fasts in 4 different Ramadans. He can do one kafara on behalf of all 4 of them. Do you guys understand? وَلَوْ فِي رَمَضَانَيْن. The fuqaha, they say, even if it's in 2 separate Ramadans, he can still do tadakhul in the kafara between all of them. I know this is a little technical and a little more than some of you are maybe expecting to handle right now, but I want you to take it anyway, just so that we can get the masail covered and have an understanding of them. What breaks a fast? I'm just going to give you guys a principle. I'm not going to go through a million scenarios. One basic principle. The ulama, they say anything that enters into the jawf of the insan will break the fast. Okay? Anything that enters into the jawf of the insan. Some scholars, jawf means basically the emptiness, the internal, system. And some scholars have further explained jawf meaning the brain or the stomach. Some say it's only the stomach, not the brain. Do you guys understand? So this does not include the lungs. Anything that enters into the lungs will not break your fast. In order for it to break your fast, it needs to enter into your esophagus and either go into your stomach or find a way to get to the brain of the insan. They say this will break the fast. Now some scholars, they say, it's not just a matter of anything entering, it has to be min jins shurbi wa ta'am. Because they say, for example, what if a fly enters into your mouth? Is that going to break your fast? What if you're walking and dust enters into your mouth? Or for example, not mouth, the stomach. So we have to be more technical here, the stomach. Or for example, you're walking outside, someone just cut some fresh grass and you can feel particles of that in your throat or in your stomach as well. And, does that break your fast? So that's why some scholars, in addition to ingesting something, what do they add on top of that? Min jins shurbi wa ta'am. That it has to be from the category of something that's edible or something that's drinkable. Now, if we understand this, the second thing that's important to know is that it must go into the throat and beyond. If it's simply in the mouth, it won't break your fast. For water, for anything to drink or eat to enter into your mouth, as long as it remains here, it doesn't go down the throat, it won't break your fast. So for example, you put water into your mouth, does that break the fast? But what if one drop enters into your throat and you're aware of it? I just let some water down my throat. Now your fast is questionable. Do you guys understand? So the hadra here is the halaq. If it enters into your mouth and stops there, no problem. Think of wudu. But if it goes down your throat, then what happens? You have a problem. Therefore, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu an, gave this very famous fatwa. A lady came to him and asked him that I cook food all day. My husband is particular on the flavors and the type of food that I cook. Is it permitted for me to taste the food without ingesting any of it? Just taking a small bit, putting it on my tongue to taste the food. What did Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anh say? He said, yes, it's okay for you. It's permitted for you to put some food on the tip of your tongue as long as you don't ingest any of it. Now, keeping this masala in mind, let's address the big debated issue in America more than anything else that anyone cares about in the month of Ramadan. What's the ruling of toothpaste and brushing your teeth in Ramadan? Like, nobody cares about anything as much as they care about toothpaste and toothbrush in the month of Ramadan. For good reasons, by the way. For good reasons. I think it's actually a good issue to be concerned of. So what's the ruling? Can I use toothbrush? Can I use toothpaste in the month of Ramadan? You guys tell me. It depends. Come on, guys, let's be technical. Let's not say yes and no. That's not a good answer. We don't give loose answers. What's the answer here? It depends. What does it depend on? If it's contained to the mouth or whether it goes down the throat. If someone is sitting there chugging toothpaste down, they have bigger problems than breaking their fast. They have a problem losing their life. They're going to be poisoned. They're going to have to call that poison number at the back of the toothpaste tube because they're sitting there chugging toothpaste down. Jokes aside, but if someone's applying excessive amounts of toothpaste and parts of it is going down their throat, there's something to be concerned of. Personally, because I don't have a face-to-face job with people, I don't work a corporate job, I can avoid it and get away with doing miswak. But for people who have work, who are teaching or they're, interacting with people face-to-face, and in particular if they're dealing with non-Muslims, I think it's very important that you rinse your mouth out and get rid of that bad smell in your mouth, whatever it is that you do. What I would suggest, though, is maybe cut back on the amount of toothpaste you use. So instead of loading the toothbrush with toothpaste, maybe put a little bit on there to get the cleaning done and to get rid of that bad scent. And inshallah, that should suffice. Okay. Common question, what's the ruling on taking blood withdrawal while fasting? It doesn't break your fast. Similarly, injecting something into yourself, injecting medication into yourself, it won't break the fast. The only time it will break the fast is if you inject directly into the stomach. If the needle enters where? Right into the stomach, which usually that doesn't happen. They're usually injecting things into your bloodstream. So if they're looking for a vein and they inject something into your vein and you sort of die or anything of that sort, it won't break the fast. This is a common question that people have, so that won't break your fast either. There's a lot of stuff that people ask. There's is hijama permitted while fasting? According to majority of the fuqaha, if a person goes for cupping while fasting, it won't break the fast. Even though there is the riwayah, aftar al-hajim wal-mahjum, that the one performing the cupping and the one who the cupping is done upon have both broken their fast. Most scholars have interpreted this narration. Aftar al-hajim, the one performing the hijama, the one performing the cupping, his fast is broken. The scholars say what this means is that it's very close and very possible he'll break it, because when he sucks out, it's possible something may go into his throat. And if you don't understand what that means, classically, when people would do hijama, they would place like a horn on the area where the incisions were made, where the superficial incisions are made. They would place a horn on top of it. And then on the other side of the horn, they would make like a little emptiness, so it'd be like a straw. Or straw is not a good example, more like a funnel. What are you thinking of? And on one side of the funnel, the person performing the hijama would apply suction. So when they would apply that suction, aftar al-hajim here, the muhaddithun, they say what this means is the blood would jump up and it's possible it may enter into their throat. And if it enters into their halaq, that's going to break their fast. Wal-mahjum, aftar al-mahjum, many of the shurrah, they say what this actually means is that when a person hijama is done upon them, they become fatigued, they become thirsty, they become lightheaded, and therefore they may be inclined to break their fast, as opposed to the act of hijama itself breaking their fast. Majority of the fuqaha are of the position that hijama performed while fasting in and of itself will not break the fast. Some Zahiriyah, however, do hold that position, but majority of the fuqaha do not hold that position. Similarly, people ask this question, what's the ruling on nicotine patches while I'm fasting? Again, it doesn't enter into your stomach directly, it enters into your bloodstream. So the fuqaha have given permission for that. People ask, what's the ruling of applying deodorant while fasting? It's the same thing again. It's not entering into your stomach, and deodorant isn't going anywhere actually, so you're good altogether because it's very superficial. I think that's it. I think we've covered most of the things that are necessary. I mean, there are 100 different questions that could be raised regarding which things do and don't break the fast. I gave you the principle, so inshallah that should suffice. There are fuqaha that talk about this idea. Some fuqaha talk about this idea of intentionally smelling or intaking fumes and smoke into the body. Do you guys understand? Like one scenario would be that someone just has some bakhur burning, some fragrance burning in their house, and you're smelling it. Not a big deal. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Now, on the other hand, someone has some sort of a drug in something that what do they call those things? No one here should know. But there's this chamber that people put drugs into, and it vaporizes it. I know too much. I know. Sorry. And they smell it, and through that they get their high. Not a bong. You know those people use it for fragrances. Actually, you know you'll get these at Bed Bath and Beyond. They'll get these things that you put liquid or oil in them, and it turns it into diffuser. That's the word, diffusers. So they'll put like oils into diffusers, and there are people. What do they put into diffusers? Different types of oils. So now, let's say for example, you add something in the diffuser with an intention. You know what? I'm going to get high by inhaling this diffuser. That'll break your fast, because you're doing it bin-niyya, bil-amad, ta'ammud, like you're doing it with intention. That'll cause your fast to break as well. The issue of vomiting comes up. What's the ruling on vomiting? Most scholars, they say that as long as you don't ingest anything from your vomit, the vomit itself won't break the fast. And the other scenario that it will break your fast is if you induce the vomiting. So if you istaqa'a means to induce the vomiting, then the fast will break. But if it just happens naturally on its own, you weren't feeling well, you vomited, you didn't ingest any of it, you rinsed your mouth out, you cleared it out, then that won't break your fast. People ask the question, what's the ruling if I accidentally eat? This happens usually in the first 1 or 2 days of Ramadan. People, they're not in the routine of not eating and drinking, so they'll take a little sip here, eat a little something there. So the answer to this is, the fuqaha, they say that this will not break the fast. There's actually a riwayah on this, that if a person eats accidentally or drinks accidentally, this will not cause their fast to break. So I'm going to stop here, inshallah. I think that the scenarios are many, but I think we've covered the usul and most of the principled issues that relate to the subject. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq, and Allah azza wa jalla grants us a deep understanding and a proper understanding of fasting. I understand that this is, some of you may feel that this is a very dry class and it was very technical, but that's how fiqh classes are, guys. There's just no other way to have a fiqh class. It's just the nature of fiqh. It's like a desert. It's very dry. You want, the more plush gardens and the rivers, you're going to have to go to tazkiyah, and you can sit there with the the muhadithun there and the scholars of tazkiyah there, and they'll, add some water to this barren land and bring some fruits from there. But that's another discussion for another time. With that, we end. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina Muhammad.